Thanks, Steve. It's a real pleasure to be here. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, possibly, to those that have joined us today. It's my great privilege to lead Open Ownership. We're an organisation that works both on the implementation of beneficial ownership reform, but as we're here to talk about today, thinking about how we want data to be structured to make it most effective for tackling corruption, for delivering better public services, and ensuring that we have the kind of governance that we deserve. Open Ownership has been developing the beneficial ownership data standard since 2017. This 0.4 release is the culmination of 6 years of really hard work, both at the theoretical level, but right down at the country level, working with those implementing these reforms to ensure that we produce a standard that is going to work for them, to help them produce the data that can meet their policy goals. I want to commend my team for the deep thinking and hard work that they've been doing for so long on this now. Data standards are difficult things in many ways. They represent such deep technical expertise and choices. And as we have gone through the development of 0.4, we have made evidence-based choices based on our experience around the world in implementing, and from the support of many of you here, as to what has ended up in this particular version. We still have further to go. Today is a really, really important milestone in the development of beneficial ownership reform globally. And I don't think I need to spend too much time with this group explaining why structured data matters, why interoperable data matters. But I will leave you with one thing, which I think we can all agree on before I hand back to Steve. Understanding who owns and controls a company in and of itself is crucial data. Understanding who owns and controls a company can only take you so far, unless we're able to link that to many other companies that those people involved with may have some influence over, or indeed many other data sets that we find inside of government. We are not going to be able to realise the impact of beneficial ownership reform around the world. So as we release 0.4 today, I think my ask of all of us, and we do this work naturally anyway, is to keep pushing the argument that we need standardized data, we need interoperable data, and that we are going to have to keep pushing to make sure that we see more of this delivered in many more places around the world, such as we can realize the real impact of beneficial ownership reform for everyone and make a significant difference to people's lives around the world. So with that, I'll hand back to Steve. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tom. So just to explain what we're going to go through today, I'll give a short presentation about the beneficial ownership data standard and hand over to my colleague, Katie, who's been leading on the development of the standard. Once we've talked a little bit about the new version that we're releasing, we'll also start handing over to international speakers who will set out why interoperability of beneficial ownership information is important, how their countries are using the beneficial ownership data standard, and also why all of this is important, what it's going to help people to do. So I will quickly start sharing my slides. So as Tom spoke about then, beneficial ownership transparency is crucial for a huge range of use cases where people need to understand who owns and controls companies, who owns and controls different types of legal entities and legal arrangements. Open ownership pushes for transparency so that people can understand this information and can make best use of beneficial ownership data and combine it with other sources of data to understand these. And we know from our work that transnational problems like this need transnational solutions. We've done research and work and connected with people to talk about why beneficial ownership transparency is not just important for anti-corruption purposes, but also when it comes to looking at climate governance, procurement integrity, countering organized crime, effective taxation. And hopefully, as lots of people know, international standards around beneficial ownership have been changing in the last few years. Organizations like the Financial Action Task Force, the UN Convention Against Corruption are all moving forwards. They're all pushing people to have better quality data, to use the data, and to make the reforms more effective. And so what we hope we can do at Open Ownership is to support all of that. And we hope that the beneficial ownership data standards can play an important role in that. So why is it important to be able to connect all this data? So our research and our work over the last 7 years has shown that beneficial ownership transparency can be complicated, or it can be quite simple. Lots of people own companies in a very straightforward way, but in all of the cases where people need to connect this information internationally, and the most interesting cases, the ones that take the most work to investigate, there are often trusts involved, multiple organizations, people go from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. There may be state-owned enterprises involved. There may be nominee relationships you need to understand. There could be publicly listed companies who haven't disclosed all their beneficial ownership information, but they might be part of chains. And what the beneficial ownership data standard allows you to do is to capture information on all of these, on how they are related to each other and how they're related to people who are acting as beneficial owners, and to build up complex ownership chains and really detailed understanding of the information that you need to get to the bottom of the question: who owns what and how do they exert control, or how do they have a relationship with those entities? Sorry, it's playing again. So for people who haven't seen the standard before, you can go to standard.openownership.org to find out more. As Tom said, we've been working on this for the last 7 years. This is version 0.4 of the standard that we have released. But for the last 3 or 4 years, we've already had a whole range of functionality that allows anyone to use our open standard to collect information, collect high quality information on the beneficial ownership of legal entities and legal arrangements. You can capture full ownership chains, a very wide range of interests. And we also have a whole set of tools that help people to use BODS data and to realize the value of standardized data. Now, as I said, we've been working on version 0.4 for the last 2 years. So I want to hand over to my colleague, Katie, who's our lead technical consultant working on BODS, to talk to us about some of the specific changes that have been happening in the last couple of years. Katie, over to you.
Thanks, Stephen. So this latest update to the beneficial ownership data standard, this version 0.4 release, it has involved, as Stephen says, thinking that's, started 2 years ago and intense work for the last year, and a wholesale update to the kind of format and the structure of the data schema, plus improvements to the guidance, the documentation. It's now, we hope, far easier to represent and to understand data updates. This is crucial for being able to communicate how beneficial ownership changes as time goes on in a particular structure. We've also introduced guidance on how the various dates that appear in BODS datasets should be interpreted, and how to represent different sorts of legal arrangements. We're hoping that these extensive edits across the documentation plus these features is going to make it even easier to understand and to use the data standard. But of course, those high-level features hide a lot of very, very detailed work that's been going on for the last year. And this is the literal small print. We've got a complete changelog of every single change or update or new feature. And that's been enumerated not just for this latest release, but you can see what's happened over the past 7 years or so, as Tom alluded to. And I think that timescale is important. With this release, we've actually confronted some of the challenges that have been in front of us from the very beginning, some 7 years ago. And I say in front of us, I think that's in front of this domain of beneficial ownership transparency. These are the kinds of challenges that any publisher of beneficial ownership information would come up against. And we hope that by looking at them and having time to look at them, we're doing that service for the community and saving, hopefully, lots of publishers of information time. So BODS, we think, is now on much firmer foundations as we go on to think about the future development of the data standard. because there is still work to be done. And I think it's important to realise, and something that has become apparent to me, is that the design questions that you face when developing a data standard, they're in addressing those design questions, it's as much an art as it is a science, which might be surprising when we're talking about data. And I've been thinking about, the very first release of BODS 7 years ago, and it seems to me that it was a kind of sketch, and it gave a really good impression of what good quality beneficial ownership data would need to look like to make these transparency reforms work. And we've taken that sketch, and over the years, we've added features, filled in detail in certain areas. We're now coming to the point where I think the final features can be added. So that's making sure that all types of corporate vehicle can be usefully represented. We can convey information about all types of ownership and control effectively, the right level of detail, no matter what jurisdiction it relates to, and also provide clarity to data users when expected information is missing. So as we fill in those details, we also realize that, some of the early thinking in the sketches might not actually be so relevant now. So we're going to be removing or simplifying aspects of BODS which might overcomplicate use. So we're looking forward to shifting our minds as a team to these kinds of developments over the next few months. And I just want to say a quick thank you to everyone who has worked on it thus far. And I'll hand back to Steve.
Thanks, Katie. That's great. Now, moving away from the open ownership and open data services teams, we're very honoured to have a number of speakers here to talk about the beneficial ownership reforms that they have been leading and pushing forward in their countries, as well as technology companies who are offering solutions for people who want to collect better quality interoperable data. First of all, I'm very honoured to be joined by the Honourable Senator Percy Down from Canada. Senator Down, if I can hand over to you, it'd be great to hear your comments about Canada's beneficial ownership reforms and why beneficial ownership data is so crucial to them.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and good morning from Canada. Canada has been very late on the beneficial owner file, and really we did not have the leadership we should have had on it, given the size of the problem in our country, and we're following international partners who have set high standards. But the good news is, and I was pleased to sponsor the beneficial ownership registry in the Canadian Senate. There's been a long-standing need for a beneficial ownership registry in Canada, and finally this year, our Bill C-42 passed into law. Canada's federal government proposed such a measure because of a lack of corporate ownership transparency was impairing our ability to combat serious financial crimes like fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion. Is also limited Canada's ability to enforce domestic and international sanctions through effective tracing and freezing of financial assets. And finally, it damaged the trust of Canadians and foreign investors in our marketplace and eroded confidence that our tax system treated everyone the same. The government recognized the significant burden that tax evasion and money laundering from criminal activities placed on the Canadian economy, a burden that had not gone unnoticed overseas. In 2019, the U.S. State Department designated Canada as a major money laundering country, with a later report from that agency estimating that between 50 billion and 120 billion Canadian dollars is laundered every year in Canada. That was further documented when the Criminal Intelligence Services Canada 2020 report, using an estimate from the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, concluded that money laundering represents between 2 and 5% of GDP in Canada and they pegged the money laundering at between 45 billion and 113 billion. In short, a serious problem, and one we're finally taking measures to combat. Now, I'll have to tell you, I'm not the person to talk much about the technical details, and I look forward to hearing from some of the other speakers on the data. But in our case, it's like my phone or indeed this link up. Can't explain how it works, but I expect the people who designed it did so in a way that makes sure it does work. And as for why the government choose this methods, that decision was made long before I joined the process. So this morning will be an educational session for me as someone who's been an advocate for beneficial ownership in Canada for many years. But I will say that for any country, and in particular for one like Canada, interoperability is vital. As a trading nation and a member of the G7, we deal with most of the major countries and trading blocs in the world. There's a lot of money being moved around by a lot of businesses, and not all of them, unfortunately, are legitimate. So if Canada and its partners are to track illicit money effectively, we need to be able to communicate information about those funds. And a standard system of information management is key to that. In short, you can have the best data system in the world, but if it's not compatible with those used by your partners, it's not much good to you. Interoperability is very important to Canada's situation for more than reasons of international cooperation. In addition to the federal government, Canada consists of 10 provinces and 3 territories, ranging in size from 40,000 people in Nunavut to some 16 million in Ontario. Canada's current beneficial ownership registry applies only to those businesses covered by the Canada Business Corporation Act, which is about 15% of all business in Canada. The rest are governed by provincial legislation. Although Quebec and British Columbia is in the process of setting up a provincial registry, the goal is to get all provinces and territories to sign on and add their own information to the registry, making it a national system. That's why it's so important that these provincial and territorial systems be compatible with the national system. It's a hope that other areas of the country as well join within the next year so that information can be readily shared within Canada as well as between Canada and its international partners. Thank you. I look forward to any questions people may have about the situation in Canada.
Thank you so much, Senator Down. That's fantastic, and absolutely agree with your points about the importance of having compatible interoperable data. And so we look forward to supporting Canada in the goals of connecting all of the data from all of those registers. Thank you very much for comments. And reminder, if you have any questions, please leave them in the chat, and we'll be coming back to pick up questions and have a question and answer session at the end once we've heard from all of our speakers today. Next, we're going to hand over to Zornitsa Manilova from the Global Legal Entity Identifier Foundation. Zornitsa is the head of data quality and is going to talk about why linking data on legal entities is important for interoperability. So I will hand over to her. Over to you.
Thank you, Steve, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone, wherever you are in the world. I'll just start sharing my slides and directly jump into this. We just heard about the importance of interoperability for the public sector, and I won't spend much more time on this slide. I just wanted to highlight some additional evidences for the importance and demand for interoperability and interconnectivity for both the public and private sectors. And to ensure seamless processes, data flow, and information exchange between the different systems, sectors, ecosystems, we need a common language that everyone, and most importantly, every system can understand. This role is usually fulfilled by global standards, such as the LEI and such as the beneficial ownership data standard. The LAI, just to give you a little bit of a background, the LAI is a 20-digit alphanumeric code based on the ISO 17442 standard and uniquely identifies legal entity globally. It connects reference data and answers questions who is who and who owns whom. And we at Glyph, we are responsible for the operational stability of the global LAI system. And we also have established a certification program for mapping partners and have successfully collaborated with several organizations. For example, we team up with SWIFT for the big and the MIG mappings to the LAI. We collaborated with ANA for the eyes into the LAI mapping. We engage also with S&P Global Market Intelligence to connect the LAI to their identifier. And of course, last but not least, we collaborated with open corporates and open ownership to create the LAI to open ownership ID mapping and integrate this in the BODS register. But let me give you one practical example and not talk just very a theoretical topic. So here on the screen, you see the Maersk Company Limited is a registered company in the UK, and it has also an LAI. By leveraging the reference data from the LAI, we can identify the direct and ultimate parent entities, which in this case is the same entity, the Danish corporation AP Møller Maersk. Then, thanks to the established mappings I just mentioned, we can create now a more comprehensive and holistic company profile. So just using the open corporates identifier, we can add additional shareholder information to the entity, or thanks to the S&P mapping, we can obtain cross-reference product information. We can investigate potential beneficial owner information, if there is any, of course, or we can gain access to issued securities via the ISINs and also have information about assigned BICs and MICs if these are available. So having this complete picture, we can seamlessly then switch between use cases and ecosystems. So having such a mapping program not only establishes the interconnectivity between the LAI and the other identifiers, but also establishes any possible combination among these mapping participants, creating a completely interconnected ecosystem. This enhances the standardization, improves the data quality, and enriches every data set part of this ecosystem. Establishing these mappings between different standards provides also the practical implementation, enabling this seamless information sharing and uninterrupted process across ecosystems, thus achieving the true interoperability. And with this, I'm at the end of my presentation. Back to you, Steve.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic. Very amazing signs of how the LAI can be used to connect a lot of these data sets. Thank you. Next, I'm going to hand over to Stephen Brandon, who's from Foster Moore. Stephen is the head of professional services for Europe for Foster Moore. And to share here, Open Ownership has been privileged to be partnered with Foster Moore and NRD companies, who are our next two speakers. They are registry software companies that support and provide the platforms that a lot of registers use all over the world in order to collect beneficial ownership data and company data. So it'd be fantastic to hear more from them about why beneficial ownership registers need to be data-driven. So I'm going to hand over to Stephen.
Thanks, Stephen. Good afternoon from Dublin in Ireland. I'm delighted to be here with you today. So as Stephen mentioned, I'm the head of professional services for Foster More in Europe, and I'm also the technical advisor to the European Business Registry Association. And over the last couple of years, I've worked on several implementations of beneficial ownership registers and interconnection systems. So before I dive into why beneficial ownership registers need to be data driven, I just want to give you a bit of background to the significance of the beneficial ownership data standard to Foster More and take you through what our partnership looks like. So we launched a beneficial ownership product on our platform, our product called Vern, and this was co-designed with beneficial ownership. This product receives regular BODS updates, and this really helps us to serve the needs of our customers and our clients in a more uniform manner. And each year we spend a lot of money in research and development in all of the registry domains, and we really believe that interoperability is the future for registries, and we've produced several white papers on this topic. So if you're interested in that, you can find them on our website, but I've also included the QR code there. So why do beneficial ownership registers need to be data driven? Well, as beneficial ownership registers continue to evolve, registers are no longer stores of data, but rather they have to be proactive organizations that participate in a wide range of activities, from cooperation with law enforcement and anti-money laundering. Registries continue to become increasingly advanced by evolving legislation, as we heard earlier, that's designed to combat crime and stop corruption. Activities such as the detection of patterns or anomalies within the data and the monitoring, these type of activities really demand data-driven decisions, and this means that the registry operators have to understand what the risk indicators and decision points look like. So to make this possible, open standards such as BODS are really tools and mechanisms that the beneficial ownership registers should be using to help them become data-driven and to learn from each other as well. So I just wanted to discuss what the evolution of the beneficial ownership register looked like a little bit, and how the BODS standard or open standards really contribute to that at each step along the way. So working clockwise around the diagram, the beneficial ownership registers usually start off as a simple custodian of data. So they're concerned with the collection, the distribution of data, and then integration with other existing registers such as corporate registers. Moving on then, beneficial ownership registers begin to use their data to carry out enhanced checks for crime prevention. So these could be supported by international standards such as FATF, and additional checks on identity verifications may be carried out, and enhanced access to the registers are usually provided to obliged entities. And next, we're looking at government integration. So this is with other government departments, could be tax authorities or law enforcement again. And we see now that digital identities are becoming popular for both individuals and corporates. So as this gains traction, it's likely that beneficial ownership registers will need to integrate with these services too. And looking to the future then, as I mentioned earlier, with interoperability, the sharing of beneficial ownership data between the registries will really allow them to carry out their functionality better, as we heard from some of the previous speakers as well, and to continue to combat crime and corruption. AI is likely to play a part in this future as well, with advanced detection of anomalies, for example. But what the point I really wanted to make with this diagram was that at each step along the way, open standards such as BODS are really crucial to helping this life cycle evolve. And it's great to see the next the 0.4 release, because this means that BODS is continuing to serve the evolution of the beneficial ownership registers as they move forward into the future. So that's it from me. Delighted to stay around for some questions later, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, and just a reminder, if you do have any questions, please put them into the chat, and we've got time at the end. Thank you everyone so far for keeping to time. This is going great. Next, we're going to hand over to Mindaugas Glodas, who is the CEO of NRD Companies. They are a provider of company registry software working all over the world with a large number of jurisdictions to help them on their evolution along this path as well to gathering and using better quality data. I'm just trying to find Mindaugas, over to you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. I hope you can hear me all right.
Yeah, we can hear you.
So I just wanted to take a little bit different perspective, and I was listening into other speakers whether this will be mentioned or not, and so far it was not, because I think that BO data and the work that you've done with BODS is very, very important. The BO data in some ways is a cornerstone of competitiveness. Now, I feel I'm okay to say that because we believe it's a bond statement. NRD Companies is the #1 in the world in terms of the registry-related projects completed over the 30 years of our existence. And being a technology company, we are also a process company. We look broader. We've completed 350 projects in total, of which about half are registry related. The others are working with other institutions. And here is what we have established. We tend more and more to use methodologies that do not seem to be technology related, such as the Business Ready, the new methodology by the World Bank, which, as you know, replaces the ease of doing business study. And it's a very interesting one. I think every single country has been using that to their benefit by attracting more investment, by positioning your country as the country where it is easy to do business. The technology that has changed, but it clearly states in that methodology that transparency of beneficial ownership helps safeguard the integrity and reputation of the business sector by making it attractable to those intended, and so on. Now, to me, this is the ultimate definition of competency, because really nobody wants to deal with crooks, right? And this is the cornerstone piece of the whole picture, to have that data. Throughout our engagement in the 50+ countries, where in more than 50 countries, we have built at least one registry, in most cases more registries, or even other IT solutions. We have noticed that there is a certain life cycle for the company, but also there are certain pillars which are unavoidable. They are sometimes called AML, KYC regime. Now, you have to make sure you comply with the global standards. You have to make sure you have proper customer identification programs. You have to make sure you have customer due diligence. You have to have ongoing monitoring. And obviously, you have to have tools available to make use of it and provide training to a very broad ranges of staff, both in public sector, but also in private sector. Now, for all that to work, you really have to have good beneficial ownership data, which is typically the easiest way is to keep it in the beneficial ownership register. Because once you have that, you can start applying things like ask once, and then do not bother your client, your investor anymore, because you have had that data and it can be shared with the institutions that need that data. Now, so far, it's not been easy to implement that because there was no internationally recognized or applied standard. But when you look at it, to make all other layers work, such as the global compliance, such as compliance to the requirements of the Financial Action Task Force, EU AML directives, and others, was very difficult. Now, Senator Down mentioned that Canada was at some point recognized as not doing very well on making sure compliance, but think of the small countries. They get gray listed in all sorts of lists in 5 minutes by not complying to just a minor detail. But when you look at it, at the center of it, it's typically business ownership data and what is being done with that, how it is being shared, how it is being made available to those who need to know. So BO data needs to be accurate, standardized, and shareable. And I think that the business ownership data standard answers that question very well, makes our life so much easier, because I will not go into details, but we have developed a system which we call BOREC, based on our unified registry platform, that is used exactly for that, to keep the data, to collect the data, to process the data, to store it and publish it, make it available to whoever needs it. Having such standard makes any conversation with our potential clients easier and helps us also to ensure that going forward, we will know a very clear path how to upgrade our systems, how to keep our customers, the governments, satisfied. Thank you. And congratulations on this launch. Stephen, I haven't seen you that excited for quite some time already. It's a big day.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the presentation. That's fantastic. So our final speaker, building on what Mindaugas was saying and the importance of countries that are pushing forward reforms internationally, we have Ms. Namibia Barry, who's the Deputy Director of the Financial Intelligence Centre in Namibia. So Ms. Barry is leading on the establishment of the beneficial ownership framework in the country, and we're happy to say that open ownership has been supporting Namibia over the last year or so as they've been pushing through all of these reforms. So Zenobia, over to you.
Thank you kindly, Stephen. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues, wherever you may be in the world. Like Stephen said, I am from Deputy at the Financial Intelligence Unit. So what does the Financial Intelligence Unit have to do with the beneficial ownership data standard? Namibia has undergone a mutual evaluation, AML-CFT mutual evaluation, with a report adopted in September 2022, and we did not do very well on recommendation 24, 25, and immediate outcome 5. So it's literally the results of the mutual evaluation that pushed Namibia into reforming the beneficial ownership transparency framework. And when we had to address the deficiencies of the mutual evaluation report, we reached out to the Eastern and Southern African Anti-Money Laundering Group, which is our FATF FSRB, and because we wanted to know what is out there, what is best practice, how do we tackle these deficiencies and get it right the first time around. And the ISAMLAC Secretariat referred us to open ownership, and before that we never heard of open ownership, and we did a little bit of the research and realized this is the help that we did not know we needed, and we reached out to open ownership, and up to today, as Stephen said, we are still tied to open ownership apron strings. So we received that a technical assistance, and we decided that open ownership is current, is relevant, and keeping up to date with the FATF or international standards, and therefore it was a no-brainer to apply for the technical assistance. They assisted us with revising the laws because that was part of the remediation. And although it is not required to have a beneficial ownership register in terms of the international standards, things are certainly leaning that way. And since we were at that crossroads, Namibia decided to embrace technology in remediating our deficiencies, to embrace technology past COVID-19, as this would probably be the best way for us to address our deficiencies within the shortest possible time. So Namibia acquired a platform, a register for that matter, or to a national register for the keeping of beneficial ownership information of legal persons and legal arrangements in Namibia that is called trust. So in the development of this register, Namibia also onboarded open ownership from the get-go to make sure whatever that the final product will comply with beneficial ownership data standards, and they are still with us on that project. And Namibia did not only do this for the sake of addressing the mutual evaluation findings, but also to remain relevant as a jurisdiction as far as trade and investment is concerned, considering that Namibia, there's a promise of our green and brown economy booming within the very near future. And we also see the benefit of such information or interoperable information in the extractive industry. So the register, once it is done, will contain interoperable, shareable data. All law enforcement agencies, competent authorities, the regulated populace, as far as AML-CFT is concerned, will have access to this register, that will keep accurate, up-to-date, beneficial ownership data. So we are not at the end of the process yet, but so far so good. And for us, it is a major win in terms of putting in place that beneficial ownership transparency framework to get it right now and for the future. I think I've answered that question.
Answered it fantastically. Thank you so much. That is the end of our speakers. Thank you all so much. It's been fantastic to hear from all of you about how you are using beneficial ownership data or collecting more beneficial ownership data or offering a service around this, and especially how that supports interoperability and people using the data. If anyone on the call has any questions, I just wanted to prompt you to put them in the Q&A. I've just been trying to check as we go. I can see there's one question from Charlie Boundy, who is maybe has left now, but is the Chief Data Officer for Companies House in the UK. He's asking about the recording. We're definitely going to share the recording, so thank you for letting us record the session. I was interested to ask for any recommended metrics for tracking improvements in beneficial ownership and the associated quantifiable benefits. We have a whole range of research around measuring the benefits of beneficial ownership reforms. Obviously, it depends from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, depending on what people are seeking, what the aims are, what the policy aims are for particular countries, and what the reforms are seeking to achieve. I can recommend going to openownership.org/research, where we have a whole number of reports. We have case studies from particular countries who've achieved their reforms over the last few years, especially ones where they have public data or they've kind of learnt a lot and shifted how they've done things over time. So I would advise people to go there. I can see that the link to our standard and the new version has already been shared in the chat, which is fantastic. I'll just wait a little minute longer just to see if anyone else has any more questions. Just while people may be thinking, to say, if you go to openownership.org, you can see all of our reports and all of the information that Open Ownership publishes, all of the guidance that we have about anyone seeking to achieve beneficial ownership reforms and facing implementation challenges. If you go to standard.openownership.org, that's where you can find all of the documentation for version 0.4 and the previous versions of BODS. And you can also find links to the kind of related tools that we have that support people if you want to visualize the data or to analyze and to review the data that's produced in line with BODS. You'll see on the Open Ownership homepage, there's an announcement about the new version of the standard. It's available in English, French, Spanish, and Russian. If people want to share it with any colleagues who maybe speak are more used to some of those languages. I can't see any.
So Stephen,
Oh, the Q&A section, sorry.
This is Catherine Davis from Open Ownership, everyone. Hello. We do actually have 8 questions in the Q&A. Are you not able to see those?
Sorry, yeah, can you share some of them? I can see, yeah.
You can't see them, or you can?
I can see them now, sorry.
Oh, okay, yeah, great. No, we've got lots of questions backing up there. And Katie, thank you. You've already answered one of them about CUSIPs. Maybe, and I believe that everyone else can see that. You can also upvote a question, everyone, if you'd like to take a look. Are you happy, Stephen, to go on down and continue chairing, reading the questions?
Sure. Yeah, sorry, some of them are anonymous. So I'm just going to have to say anonymous participant. What future proofing is there to allow for the future incorporation of government-sponsored digital IDs or cryptographic masks, such as ERC20, standard node and wallet IDs? So BODS is arranged around a statement-based model. So we have the statements on entities, statements on people, and statements about the relationships between them. So any IDs that are provided can be stored in the identifiers array. So if they're personal IDs, they can be stored in the identifiers array of person statements. And for entities, any IDs can be stored in the identifier array for the entity. So we specifically designed it that way so that the more information you have about these entities and people, and the more IDs you have, the easier it is to connect to other sorts of data. So we can definitely support on those. Which countries have adopted or are in the process of using BODS for domestic registers? Apologies, this is another anonymous participant. So countries including Latvia, Armenia, Nigeria, Canada, Namibia that we mentioned earlier, Botswana, and a lot of other countries that we are working with are using BODS. Some are using it for full national registers. Some of the examples I just mentioned. Some of them are using it, and we're exploring use cases, for example, in Latin America, around collecting data on the companies participating in public procurement. BODS is also connected to the open contracting data standard. So in countries that are using that for their contracting data, you can the way that we collect identifiers is aligned, so it makes it more easier to identify and find the beneficial owners of people in public procurement. So if you keep an eye on the Open Ownership website, anytime that there are new countries using BODS, we will hopefully be working with them, or will help to share the information about them. It goes. It's worth saying as well, there are other users who aren't countries. So the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, people like the Global Energy Monitor, and other people who are interested in global ownership are starting to use BODS as well. So organizations that are global and not just single countries. How does BODS handle potentially inconsistent?
I can take this one, Stephen.
Yeah, do you want to get it?
So this is a question about how BODS handles potentially inconsistent information on the same beneficial owner in multiple registries or data sources. And this comes back to what I was saying earlier about the early versions of BODS sketching out what a really good quality data would look like. And we've used this idea of a statement to facilitate the idea that we might have statements about the same person or the same entity coming from multiple sources. So our very data model accounts for this. And so what we do is we can bring together statements which have unique IDs from different sources. But as Stephen was alluding to, within those source statements, there should be IDs. And this is where the interoperability comes in. Once we're using LEIs, or once we're using identifiers from national registries, then we should be able to see where different statements are about the same entity or the same person. And it allows us to build up a picture of what is being reported where. So that's kind of built into the standard as it's designed.
Fantastic. Thank you, Katie. I'm going to try to get through some more questions. How do you monitor all the uses of BODS to demonstrate the importance impact of this work? As I said, we have a range of impact studies and case studies that are written up on the Open Ownership website. You can go to the Open Ownership map, which you can find from our homepage, and every country has a country page where we show the beneficial ownership register information, and also there will be stories and links if there are examples where BODS is being used, or where we have published kind of case studies about them. What are the plans? This question from Mohammed. What are the plans to support CSOs media to use BODS data to conduct social accountability projects? So we make available a variety of BODS data sets, and would be happy to speak to you about those in the countries that make their data public and use where it's available in BODS to help with that. We're joining a very interesting project at the moment. The Global Media Registry is working on a unique media identifier and going through the ISO process. So I hope that there will be more ways that BODS can be useful to global actors around this in future. And I'd be happy to connect with you offline about that. Oh, there's good questions. Are there specific standards for countries that use more than one BO register, e.g. for different provinces or states? So this speaks to the issue that Senator Dan was talking about earlier on. So what we hope is that BODS can be used for either for connecting data between jurisdictions, so internationally, or within a particular country. So in jurisdictions like Canada, Namibia, South Africa, they have a large number of registers held by different agencies within the country. So either perhaps held by the company registrar and also held by the Master of the High Courts or the trust registries. Connecting all of that information is a challenge. And the more people can use one data standard like BODS, the easier it can become. And so what we hope is that BODS can be used for that. And we have some specific guidance that we've published that talks about how you can use it for state usage. There's a question from Kirill. Katie, would you want to pick that one up about some of the work that we are looking at in terms of BODS version 1?
Kirill's question, yes. So, and I think, Kirill, you've already found that we've got quite a lot of modeling advice now in the documentation. So there is a full schema browser and also schema reference page where, for example, definitions and descriptions for code list codes can be found. We also, as you found, and I'll paste in that link again, we have a whole section now which is devoted to modeling guidance. So this is how entity statements and relationship statements can be used to represent, for example, state ownership of enterprises or nominee relationships. So there's we're making sure that we publish as much guidance as possible about how elements of the data standard can be used and trying to provide useful definitions. And we're always grateful for any feedback and requests from users. So we do publish the data standard in a GitHub repository. So there is a facility to add questions and requests in there.
Thanks, Katie. We just have a couple of minutes left. I'll go very quickly. Question from Charles Tom. How do you link beneficial ownership registers with land right registers? There's a whole piece that we just published about this on the Open Ownership website that I've linked to, talking about linking beneficial ownership data on corporate vehicles and assets. So I'll refer you to that. That's a really great piece from my colleague Timon. And final couple of questions. Another question from Mohammed. What are the plans to support low and middle income countries to deploy such innovations? So what we hope is that we offer BODS as an open standard that anyone can reuse. We've worked with a number of countries, for example, Nigeria and others, where with an open standard like BODS, anyone can build tools to create interoperable data. And then you can rely on the standard to be there so that you're not tied into one particular service provider. You can have that data, you can use it, and you can know that it's standardized and usable in future. So there's great opportunities there where people can either develop to the standard themselves or they can buy services that are available. And we provide support to a number of people who are doing that work. And finally, Mark's question, what registers are making this data available? Again, if you go to the open ownership map, we try to keep it as much up-to-date information as we can on all the countries that have registers, that are launching registers, Just today, Norway has announced that in a couple of months they're going to have their public register that is released in October. So we'll constantly be keeping an eye on this and sharing kind of best practices and what people are doing, especially when people are using BODS. Thank you all so much for joining us. We have one final request from everyone, which is that if I remove the pin, Senator Down has asked whether everyone can turn on their cameras. I think you should all have the ability to do that, to take a picture of all the people who have attended. So hopefully you've all got the right to do that. And if you're happy to do so, it'd be great to see everyone. Just so that we can really quickly say congratulations. I don't know if we're all supposed to shout BODS or something, something along those lines, but this just gives me the opportunity, hopefully Senator Down, that would be okay for someone to capture the picture. Just to say thank you all so much for joining us today for the launch of version 0.4 of the Beneficial Ownership Data Standard. As I said, you can go to openownership.org or standard.openownership.org to find all the information about the standard, and please do get in touch. All of the details are on the Open Ownership website if you want to reach out to us, or if you have any further information that you need. So thank you all very much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks so much.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye. Congratulations again to Open Ownership.
Thank you, Zenobia.
Thank you so much, Zenobia.